So the focus of today's video is plants. Plants, and more plants. So let's go back to the weeks before the 21st of September 2021. So that's nearly 2 years ago. It will be in a month's time. So in the weeks, so that date is a special date because that is when Mr. Jinx moved into this enclosure, and I allowed it a week before he moved in for everything to sort of settle. However, it was looking very different to what it is. Well, not, it was still ecological and naturalistic, but the kind of landscape was different. Although, having said that, there was still a distinctive warmer side and a cooler side, and the middle area has always been kind of like the more humid zone. But since then, so the plants have kind of varied. With more research into leopard gecko natural habitat and the plants that grow there. So back when I first did this, I didn't really know much about the plants that grow in their natural habitat. But I did know a little bit about plants that can grow well in terrariums, just from doing some research on the internet and watching YouTube videos. So, because that's the thing, you see, you can try and replicate a slice of their wild habitat, but you've got to consider also that the the situation that you're trying to replicate it in is a terrarium, and which is indoors. So that immediately influences the climate that you're trying to create, because indoors is obviously different to outdoors. And some plants, which I've learned the hard way, so like alpine plants, for instance, some of those, like I think I went to my local alpine plant nursery and was asking for advice on plants that grow in sort of like the Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal sort of areas where leopard geckos live in the wild. And I was like saying, I'm trying to sort of grow them in a terrarium, and basically narrowed it down to sort of succulent plants being the most successful for terrarium conditions, because some of the ones that I was sort of, the gist of the advice was that some plants like alpines, even though they were specific to the area, natural habitat, they wouldn't have been suitable for terrarium because they really needed that kind of outdoor environment to thrive. Yeah. So, um, although I took the risk, plants are relatively inexpensive to buy anyway. So I just kind of popped it in anyway. But it probably lasted, I don't know, 6 months to 1 year, and then eventually fizzled down. So it's there's been a lot of trial and error with this specific terrarium and the plants that grow. Okay, and I have gone through a fair few plants over the last 2 years. So anyway, but the original plants, which are still alive and well there now, this lace aloe here. So it's in the aloe vera family, and aloes generally in natural habitats grow in like arid desert environments. The lace aloe is specifically natural to Africa, so like South Africa, um, particularly, I think. Um, but plants come from loads and loads of different like families. So like the aloe family is massive. The asparagus family is massive. So there's loads of like different varieties. So and it can create, it can cause a lot of headache and what have you if you're trying to be exact. So I think the gist of this is really I don't think it's ever going to be exact, basically. So we just have to sort of go with um, something as close as, yeah. Um, so yeah, so going back to 2 years ago, when my research wasn't as, or my knowledge on plants, say, wasn't as, I'm not saying it's good now, but I mean it was kind of even more amateur back 2 years ago. So I was just researching plants that grow well in terrariums, and the ones that came up were aloes, succulents, like general sort of succulents, which include like jade plants. That was a plant that was in here, but that died. Um, what else? I tried some herb plants as well, and some of them worked, most of them didn't. But again, for a variety of reasons, soil conditions, how they were planted, maybe if I'd have planted them a bit more carefully, they could have done better, or maybe not. So there's lots of different arguments really when thinking about plants. They can be really kind of fussy, like humans. So so it's a good kind of. I think the key is that they need soil and light. Yeah. Um, some plants love poor soils, shallow soils, sandy soils. Other plants prefer rich, humus kind of fertile soils. And some plants are sort of mediocre. And then you also have the sun aspect. So some plants like full sun, hot, dry conditions. Other plants can tolerate part shade, full shade, and what have you, and so on. Yeah, so yeah, it's good to kind of um, consider the kind of when you're thinking of plants, you also have to consider the sort of type of soil that you have in your setup. And the lighting aspect, because obviously plants photosynthesize through the light in order to thrive. So making sure that there's a mixture of those wavelengths of light. So, for instance, UV, visible light, and some infrared. They're important for plant growth. I'm not going to explain why because it's too scientific, but yeah, generally, plant lighting is important, and also soil quality is also important um, when it comes to like the drainage and the sort of different like particles within the soil. So this soil here is kind of a mishmash of lots of different sort of. There's some grit. There's organic topsoil. There's cocoa fibre. There's sphagnum moss. Um, there's even orchid bark mulching sections. And over time, it's kind of broken down and sort of, you know, conditioned itself through the microorganisms, bacteria, and whatnot, insects in the soil, for example, like worms, beetles, grubs, springtails, isopods, all that kind of stuff, play their part in um, developing the soil. Yeah, so I don't really have to do much at all other than give it an occasional watering or spray misting. Okay. So yeah, so generally, I mean, I do have a sort of a bit of a gardening background, which has helped in creating this. And I also did a organic gardening design course many moons ago, when I was traveling, and that kind of taught me a little bit about sort of sustainable, ecological kind of garden designs. So that kind of background and sort of knowledge and influence has helped me sort of get the picture in my head as to what I wanted to create here. Anyway, so let's just go into the plants that I have currently. So this side is the kind of more deserty, kind of arid side, scrubland sort of, um, and it mostly, well, all the plants that live here basically need dry, lots of light, and can tolerate the sort of drier, sandier, slightly more acidic soils. Okay, so we have the lace aloe here, followed by the Haworthia, again a native to Africa. Then there's the aloe vera, which is native to the arid desert regions of Africa and South Asia. So that's closer to the kind of biotope tick box criteria. So that's all the plants in the sort of arid zone. So there's three different plants there: the lace aloe, the Haworthia, and the aloe vera. So this aloe vera is amazing as well. As you can see, I've cut it back, which promotes further growth. As you can see, these like stem things here can grow really quite quickly. And aloe vera is very can be used as like a sort of remedy, home remedy for like skin care, even hair care, that sort of thing. So I've even used it, some of it myself, to kind of moisturize skin and whatnot. Okay, mixed with some tea tree oil, it's brilliant. I'll leave you with that thought. Okay, then this sort of area here is more sort of kind of like a forest edge sort of zone, semi-tropical, not as warm as this area, not as cool as this area. So it's sort of like in between, sort of humid, and this area is where the soil is richest. So there's lots. So when I sort of bury I'm not going to do it now because the stuff will go everywhere. But when I was planting this is a marjoram. Yeah. Now, marjoram is a common herb available in garden centres in the UK. And it's used for culinary purposes. So it's excellent with pizza as like a topping. So it can be used in cooking and medicinal purposes. And when you actually touch the leaves and then smell fingers, you can smell that lovely kind of marjoram smell. And it flowers in July through to August. It's a perennial, meaning that it will grow back year on year. And this one I planted about I think it was 2 weeks ago. So basically, how I planted it was I dug a hole just with my hand. So that was the pot that it came in. And it's from a chemical free or like herbicide and pesticide free garden centre. So, and with this being a kind of like organic terrarium, I didn't need to put it through a quarantine period. So it could just go straight in. Um, so I dug the hole with my hand, larger than the pot that it came in. Um, and to say the hole was like sort of around here, yeah. And then I dug the hole pretty deep so that when I put the plant in, it was like the root ball was how can I explain? Sort of like half the depth down into the hole. Yeah. I filled the bottom of the hole with water, and which then soaked into the root ball, and then filled the hole with the soil. And when I was digging, I noticed that the soil was really rich and sort of rich, kind of humus, organic soil. Okay, we can see that there's a darkling beetle there. He likes it by that marjoram for some reason. Don't know what it is, but I've seen him there quite a lot. So that is the marjoram, and that marjoram grow in the wild. They can tolerate like poorer soils, really. They're quite hardy. They can tolerate a range of sort of conditions: part shade, sunny. They can grow on grassy banks, roadside verges, all that kind of sort of stuff, really. So they're pretty hardy. So hopefully he'll do well there. Behind that, we're into kind of like what I call the forest zone, temperate forest zone. So this is where it kind of gets more kind of moist and sort of subtropical. And here we have a ficus. Again, common house plant available in many garden centres in the UK. And it also grows in sort of the arid sort of habitats. Mr. Jinx. Arid sort of habitats of the world. Okay, so including Asia and Africa. Next to that is the snake plant, and this guy has been here since the original setup. So this guy is doing really well. I rarely have to touch it, really, only if I need to kind of cut it back, um, which I normally do just before the winter sets in. Yeah. So usually kind of November, early December, I'll cut those leaves back a little bit and it'll regrow. Yeah. It's pretty hard to kill, really, once it's in, and it's well, like I say, it's nearly 2 years old. Well, 2 years since it's been in here, so it's quite happy there, and yeah, and they're native to Africa. So again, um, but you know they can grow. So the snake plant, which is Sansevieria family, the same as this one here, which is a Sansevieria cylindrica variety of snake plant. They generally grow in the arid, sort of semi-desert areas of Africa and southern Asia. So, but the snake plant there, that particular species, I think, is native to Africa. Okay, so and while I'm talking about Africa, 2 years ago when I was researching, I found out that it was best to select plants that kind of grow in the same region together in the wild. Yeah. So back then there was a lot of plants from Africa, basically. And then further down the line, I was like, oh, well, leopard geckos are from Asia, so let's check out plants there. And some of them cross matched, so that was all good. Um, so yeah, so then we have that's the Sansevieria cylindrica and Sansevieria dracaena at the back there. Next to that is the Carex grass. Now I think it's dead, so I'm just using it for decorative purposes. And Carex is a huge family of grasses. And I'm not actually, I can't remember now off the top of my head where this particular Carex is from or the type of species. I think it's a Carex bronco. So it has kind of like bronzy, kind of coloured blades of grass. But that, I think, has, well, I might be wrong. It's mainly for like the grassy kind of decorative aesthetic purpose, really. On this kind of like rocky sort of grassland zone. Okay. So yeah, the this one here is an asparagus fern, um, and this is done really well as well. It was planted in there, say, I don't know, can't remember the exact time. It was planted later than I think maybe about 18 months ago. I planted it in there, and it's done well since. It likes a kind of moist soil, not soaking. Well, you got to be careful with succulents when you is that you don't overwater them because it can cause like root rot. Yeah, damage the roots and then inhibit the growth. Um, but this is doing well, and it's on the cooler end of the terrarium. But when I say cooler end, again, climate, the air temperature in there is pretty much the same from one side to the other than obviously in this area directly below with the beam of the light there, which is the heat lamp. But at night time, the sort of ambient temperature is around about the same on both sides. The humidity may vary slightly, and the humidity is also varies because there are fans, air fans located on top of the mesh. There's a couple on that side and a couple on this side, so they come on during the day as well at different times. So that will circulate sort of air around the sort of terrarium, draw air in and out, etc. Okay, so yeah. Um, so that's basically it in a nutshell about plants, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. I've gone into quite a lot of detail there, really. Soils, light, um, native habitats, and so on. But generally, so far, the ones that I have in here now are doing very well, um, and hopefully will last a long while. So yeah, so I think to summarize, the key points really is when you're considering plants. So look into the native habitat of the lizard or snake or whatever you have, reptile, amphibian, um, and see what is available in garden centres. That can be quite a time consuming task, is kind of cross matching what grows in the wild habitat and what's available in garden centres. And then also figure out which ones, most terrarium designs are either tropical or arid. Those are the two kind of main. Some can be a little bit of a mixture of all. So you might have, like for instance here, I would say this back area is like subtropical because it does get quite humid and sort of spray misted. Not every day, but usually around once a week or so. Yeah. Um, Whereas some tropical setups need kind of, much more moisture than that. So I would probably describe this setup as a sort of semi arid, semi tropical. I don't know. But yeah, anyway. So that is all for now, folks. But yeah, so I hope that has given you some insight and has helped. Encourage you to do some of your own research. Yeah. So over and out.